we've been having awkward conversations about tough things today, and there's someone that actually has a lot of awkward conversations, and he brought up his name's Ruslan KD. He is he's a rapper and a hip hop artist, and he actually has a great podcast. Actually, links all below. Go and check out all this stuff. I just really like his stuff. I come across him recently and really like his stuff because what he does is he talks very clearly and speaks out about things that shouldn't be happening, right? He speaks out against bad theology and speaks out against people doing call themselves Christians and not doing certain things. So he does some great things. I love his content. Actually, the production value of his content, I actually really like it. It's quite simple, but he has a great little studio set up. And so Ruslan, great work. I really like his content. Go and check it out. I recently saw this post a couple of days ago where he talks about a situation where a transgender or a trans designer who's apparently a Satanist, who's a Satanist brand, was pulled from Target. And then after it was pulled from Target, apparently all the orders surged. And it's funny how we've been talking a lot recently over previous weeks about all these boycotts on Target, on Bud Light, on all these people that are trying to go woke, and now they're going broke, right? Because we're standing up for we're standing up for voting with our wallets, and it's really good. And he's talking about, it's interesting that a lot of these people actually, he challenges us. What's the difference between a protest and a promotion? And I thought there was a very smart take on this conversation, because we've been talking about all these awkward things tonight. Been talking about how do you have awkward conversations as a leader. But the reason why I kind of wanted to finish off on this, and we'll get to our Bible verse soon, the reason why I want to finish off with it, I thought it was a perfect cherry on the top of, it's a lesson about all the things we've been talking about today, that we need to address awkward conversations, but we need to be careful. And he has this conversation with Zuby, who's also another artist, and they're talking about how it's really interesting that most of the promotion of all of these, people throwing up in arms, going, I can't believe that they're allowing a trans person or a drag queen to twerk in front of a child, and then they show a photo of it or a video of it, and they're saying both Ruslan and Zubi are having this conversation around, we've got to be careful. Yes, we need to stand up and protest about this stuff, but we shouldn't be promoting it. That it's funny that if you look at most of the people, if you find this content anywhere, you'll most likely find this content on a conservative platform. Conservatives are actually giving this exposure. And this is a perfect example, this story of this Satanist brand or designer who after all the conservatives were up in arms about this situation, now his orders surge because we as conservatives are actually promoting this person, and people are going into, oh, that's a nice shirt. Like, I'll go check that out. Dr. Rod, how do we find that line between, because we have to have the awkward conversations. We have to have the awkward conversations. And I believe that some of us, not all of us, but some of us are called to call out certain behaviors, like we've spoken about before. We believe that we've been called to call out poor leadership, that behavior. But how do we find that balance between standing up for something or protesting against something and just flat out promoting it?
Look, I thought that was a really thoughtful podcast. The points that Zuby made there were really worth hearing. And I'd strongly encourage folk who are watching this podcast to get on and have a look at that particular conversation. I think it was eye-opening, very, very thought-provoking. Look, I think this hinges around what we economists would call consumer sovereignty.
Yep.
Something I learned as a first-year university economics student a long, long time ago, before you were born, Craig.
Must have been a long time ago.
And in a way, what my approach is to exercise what sovereignty I have as a consumer and let the chips fall where they may. So I wouldn't bother going into a Target store at all because there are alternatives. And as you know, I happen to be in the United States at the moment, and there is a Target store not very far from where I'm staying. I haven't been to that Target store since they put the merchandise on display. They did move it to the back of the store, as I understand it. But as a consumer, it's my choice where I spend my dollars. And so as a Christian, I do tend to make informed choices about where I spend my hard-won dollars, and I avoid any business that doesn't align with my views. Now, it is impossible to avoid them all. It's not that easy. And so it's not something I make a religion of, and I certainly don't criticise other people if they don't have exactly the same approach that I do. Now, there's a bit of a difference, I think, between exercising our sovereignty as individual consumers, and that certainly happened, say, with Bud Light, and it's partly what's happened with Target. And I should correct something I said last week. I said their market capitalisation had fallen by between $15 and $19 billion. It was $10 billion. It was still a lot of money.
Still a lot,
that's
lot
large
more cash than you and I have.
Yeah, I reckon. But see, that's just the outcome of consumers exercising their sovereignty. They've got what you might call dollar votes, and they spend those dollar votes where they will. Now, I think one of the issues that Zuby was identifying here is that activists can unwittingly promote what it is that they're trying to suppress. That's not so much a criticism of consumers per se. And that's what, again, to bring some economic language to bear, that's just what we would call a spillover effect. In other words, there's an unintended effect that's come as a result of our actions. Now, the activists might counter-argue, but we managed to convince enough people to exercise their sovereignty as consumers to force Target to change the way in which they were promoting these particular products. And by the way, and again, my reference here is to the Daily Wire. The Daily Wire reports that there are quite a few large corporations that are really not going hard at all on this Pride Month. So they're not really celebrating it as corporations in the same way that they were, say, last year or the year before. Now, I think that's largely the result of consumers exercising their sovereignty. I did hear one economist, whose name escapes me, and I've never read any of his work, say that it was economic terrorism. That's just garbage. And if I was his head of department, I'd do everything I could to sack him for being such an ignorant person about basic economics. Economic terrorism is burning down buildings.
Oh, okay.
That's what economic terrorism is.
Okay.
And there's nobody burning down buildings on the conservative side. These people are exercising their sovereignty as consumers, and he should go and read a first-year economics textbook and get his terminology right. I mean, he was an absolute disgrace to the economics profession. He had an Australian accent too, by the way, so I might try and do some research and find out how he escaped from Australia and wound up at a US institution of higher learning. But crikey, if you're one of his students, I'd stop going to his classes, that's for sure. Look, consumer sovereignty is a strong thing. Absolutely.
Don't go to his lectures.
And you're a marketer. Well, one of the things you do a lot of good marketing, digital marketing in particular. And what you're trying to do, of course, is to work with consumers to exercise their sovereignty in a way that suits you. So you're trying to influence. You're an influencer. Good marketers are influencers. They influence consumers to exercise their sovereignty as consumers in a particular way. And I think that's a good thing. That's one of the great contributions that good marketing can actually make to our society. But I do think the point that was made in that podcast, as activists, we do need to be aware of spillover effects. They are unintended and often unexpected effects. We need to think through what our activism itself might end up producing. And by the way, the activism by the far left, of course, has produced a bit of a pendulum swing. And I think we're beginning to see just the very early stages of a swing back to a little bit more conservatism. I think we probably have to wait around for another couple of years yet to see where it goes. But I think there are going to be a lot of politicians out in the cold within the next few years, and I suspect there will be a few so-called conservative political parties, particularly in my country, Australia, that might find they've got basically no supporters at all and no votes in upcoming elections because they've chosen to move to the left, and they're not winning votes by doing it. And I suspect that we'll see a splintering of conservative votes in many, many countries. And ultimately, I think what will happen is we will see new conservative political parties rise to take place of those that are really only conservative in name today. But all of this is consumers exercising their sovereignty, and that is a good thing.
So one thing that I really like what they were talking about, both Ruslan and Zubi, was that it seems like sometimes, why are we doing it? You know, like why are we actually doing it? Because are we just doing it for views? Are we just showing this thing because it's trending and we want to get views and shock factor and all that sort of stuff? Well, we're doing it for the wrong reason. But if you actually really want to protest it, speak out about bad behavior. Actually, I talk about this a lot in our free leadership development program. Yes, link in description, my shameless plug yet again. I speak about this a lot when I'm speaking against poor leadership, is that I speak about the behavior. We try to separate the person and the behavior, right? Poor leadership is not a person, it's a behavior. And there's a lot of times that I won't actually share stories. And the challenge is I'm a storyteller. I love to tell stories and I love to go into detail about my experiences so that you can learn to use it as a metaphor so you can learn. That's how I teach everything. However, when I start talking about my experiences with poor leadership, I get a little vague with what I'm talking about. I try to not share too much detail. I try to talk in generalities so that I'm not actually really talking about the actual situation, because I don't want to give light to that situation, negative or positive or anything like that. I just don't want to highlight it. I can still talk about the behaviors and separate it from the actual event. And so if you feel like you're called to stand up against something in this time of having all these awkward conversations, make sure you're speaking against the behavior rather than talking about the actual situation, because we could be giving the situation promotion rather than protest. And so I think that we as leaders, when we have awkward conversations, we need to catch ourselves. Are we doing the bidding of the devil, so to speak, by sharing this out? Should I be filtering what I share and speak against the behavior rather than actually sharing the actual item or the event? And in watching this podcast, I thought it was great. Once again, go and check these guys out. They're awesome. I found that as watching it, I was sitting there in the back of my head going, am I guilty of that? What things have we used that I've used a screenshot of an article that maybe I was promoting the imagery of that event rather than actually, speaking against it. So I need to check myself. And so my challenge to you as a leader is make sure that when you are in this place of standing up against the craziness that's happening in this world, make sure that you are speaking against behavior rather than promoting the actual event. Hey, you just watched an excerpt from the On the Cube Leadership Podcast. If you like that, hit the like button and put a comment below. Hey, if you want to watch more videos like this, check out our channel, and while you're there, make sure you subscribe.